On PM Express tonight, we're talking Ghana's housing deficit, rethinking technology for affordable housing. And you and I know that that has been a big challenge in this country, and subsequent governments have been trying to resolve the issues. Where are we now? We'll find out. Ghana's housing deficit currently stands at 1.7 million housing units. And you heard the Minister for Works and Housing some time ago speak about how government intends to tackle this problem. We'll get to hear from the minister shortly. But also, government says to reverse the trend, we're told that there is the need for a minimum annual delivery of about 85,000 housing units over the next 20 years. 85,000 units. And a worrying phenomenon which government says it is dealing with. So let's look at some interventions government says it's making to deal with this problem. Government says it will facilitate new ways of constructing homes. Now, it also says the institution of creative financing schemes will be engineered, and that will be geared towards improving overall affordability and access to decent homes for all. How does government intend to achieve this? We'll also be interrogating that shortly. Now, government also says an amount of 1 billion Ghana cedis, according to government, has been voted to establish a mortgage and housing finance scheme. Who will benefit from this financial scheme? And this is to be seeded with at least 100 million Ghana cedis every fiscal year over the next 5 years. But what kind of technologies are we introducing into the housing sector? Because we're told technologies can help us improve on affordable housing. So we're talking about green technology, and it is housing that incorporates environmentally sustainable features. Now, you look at what benefits you're getting from these technologies, and it lowers energy cost burden and improved health. There are so many other technologies that can improve affordable housing, and we'll be exploring those technologies tonight on PM Express. The question is, we are rethinking technology for affordable housing. Where do we start from? So we've got all the answers on PM Express. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to PM Express. My guest in the studio, Dorothy Kwashi, is Executive Director of Elegant Homes. Kobe Adams is also Commercial Director at Supersem Cement. Remember, they are the lead sponsors for our fair, Habitat Fair, which comes off from the 20th of September. And you don't want to miss that, because we have all the answers to your housing problems. Also joining me via Skype is Professor Divine Ahaji, who is Head of Center for Settlement Studies at KNUST. Good evening to you, Prof. We're grateful for your time. All right, so we're still trying to get Prof to get his audio well, and we're talking about the housing deficit, and this conversation is geared towards our Habitat Fair, which comes off on September 20th, and we're inviting everyone to be part of that, because we've established that the housing deficit keeps increasing, even though subsequent governments are saying they're doing much to settle this gap, but we're still where we are. Let me pick your thoughts quickly, Professor Haji, if you can hear me, Prof. The housing gap, which currently stands at 1.7, and there's been improvements according to government, but from where you sit, what would you say about the housing deficit? All right, so as we try to get Professor Haji, I would come back to the studio, but I'd like to establish a certain point before I come to the studio. As we wait to hear from Professor Haji on this housing deficit, very fundamental and very important in our lives, let's listen to the housing minister, who's been speaking about how government intends to resolve the housing situation.
The overall aim of government's infrastructure delivery policies and programs is to build a modern and resilient society, to ensure that the development of infrastructure brings about improvement in the overall economic and social well-being of these great people of this country. The strategic direction, therefore, for infrastructure delivery is to leverage private sector resources and expertise for the provision of economic and social infrastructure in an integrated manner. This is the hard truth I want you to know. Ghana's housing deficit is currently assessed as well over 2 million. And whereas the annual housing requirement is about 250,000 units, supply figures are about 45,000 units per annum, holding all factors constant. It is in the light of this that the government is embarking on a housing program aimed at facilitating construction of 250,000 housing units yearly over the next 8 years through public-private partnership. It is said a man will run depending on what is chasing him. It is the position of the ministry that unless we deploy revolutionary financial mechanisms, the yawning housing deficit will mock us for a long time. It is in the light of the above that the ministry is working hand in hand with the Ministry of Finance to create a national housing and mortgage fund. The fund would be a special purpose vehicle to leverage private capital into housing and infrastructure investments, and also enable the Ministry of Works and Housing channel long-term appropriate price financing towards the housing sector. The fund will create for the first time in the financial space a credible mortgage regime in Ghana to enable majority of our people, especially workers, have their own homes in the evening of their years. The fund will be sourced from pension funds, housing, bonds, grants, insurance companies, primary reserve of the central bank, treasury single account, and tax incentives.
Professor Ahaji is back on Skype, and he's going to be talking about the housing deficits and where we are now. Good evening to you, Prof.
And good evening to your viewers.
Prof, I just want us to look at the gap we have in the housing sector and look at whether we've had any improvement over the period.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the issue of the estimates, what is in the literature now is around 2 million as government is stating. But then what I want to say is that in terms of the issue of improvement, I can tell you that if the government says the housing deficit is around 2 million and they want to make an impact, what is currently the situation is that government's contribution to housing is just 5%, which is public. We have the upper and the middle class who are mostly self-built, taking care of the 25%, and then the informal and low income consists around 70%, which government is not doing anything at all at that area. So when government says it's making contribution on improvement, that will be around the 5%. And even with the 5%, it is true that over the years, government efforts have rather dwindled rather than improving. And so I think that is where I will want to take the argument from.
Well, let me come to the studio and I have you hold Prof for just a minute and start with Dorothy. Dorothy, you are at Elegant Homes and you've been bringing some solutions to our housing needs. We'll get to talk about the collaboration of government and the private sector, which Prof would also be hinting on. But what are you providing, or what services are you providing for the public?
We are providing, I'll say, housing services. We build houses for sale and we also construct for people. And we also sell high quality UPVC windows, door profiles and accessories to people who are also building their own homes. So that is the general service we provide.
What are the challenges that people come to you with on a daily basis?
Well, on daily basis, people come with the expectation that they will get properties that are our houses that are way down there in terms of pricing. I mean, something that they can afford, maybe 1 bedroom self-contained, that kind of houses is what they are looking for. But what we do is quite different. We are also targeting a different kind of market, and so we cannot provide that kind of service at the moment to the very vulnerable in society, who hitherto want something just like a self-contained to live in.
Kobe, you're from SuperSem.
Correct.
And you've been providing cement. I know you do other things just to help the housing sector to improve. Tell me more about your company.
Well, by way of background, SuperSem Cement launched in Ghana in late 2018. We're the first Ghanaian operation for Lafarge Holcim, which is the world's largest manufacturer of cement. What that means is that we bring with us a wealth of expertise. We're present in 90 countries, and we've brought all of that know-how, all of that expertise into the Ghanaian market. And what we're putting out, we like to say, amounts to the best quality cement on the Ghanaian market, but still at a price that the everyday man is able to afford. So that's a little background about SuperSem Cement.
If you talk about best quality cement, what are you talking about?
Okay, so I mean, there are different types of cement. I mean, growing up to us, all cement was cement. It wasn't until we got a little bit older that we realized that quality counts for quite a lot, and to that end we've invested millions of dollars in putting together a state-of-the-art laboratory and infrastructure in the Tema Free Zones enclave, where we are manufacturing the cement and we're providing to the Ghanaian market.
I would like to get to know why I should choose SuperSem over all the other cements, but let me get back to Prof and find out. Prof, it does appear that subsequent government, I mean all the governments always tell us that they're doing something to turn around the situation, but it just, the results hasn't been impressive. What are we not doing right?
Yeah, thank you very much. And as Madam rightly mentioned over there, about the issue of the vulnerable. And it's interesting that our gentleman also talked about housing everybody. But you see, let's come to the issue of the philosophy of housing. We need to address this from whether we are seeing housing as a basic need or housing as an economic commodity, which is for demand and supply. And where the government is supposed to concentrate is the issue of the philosophy of basic need. And that is why I'm saying that the 70% of Ghanaians, including even the 25% who are burdened for themselves, is where the government is supposed to be targeting the vulnerable. And so when you look at the figures, and if you have some time, I can give you some figures for you to show that. Even if you take since independence, if you compare ourselves to Malaysia, South Africa, Singapore, Malaysia government, I'm talking about government and not what individuals are doing. Malaysia has built up to about 3 million houses for the citizens. Singapore is getting to about 1 million. But if you look at the statistics in Ghana, if I'm not exaggerating, what government has done over the years since independence might not be up to 200,000 houses.
Wow.
See, and the issue is that government always build and is focusing on government officials. When government wants to build, they say, I'm building for government officials. But the country is not about government workers. It's about Ghanaians. How many people are in the public sector? They are not even up to 1 million. So when government says it's building, it's supposed to be building for Ghanaians. And that is where we are saying that the 70% of Ghanaians who are vulnerable is where government needs to be targeting. And that is where government is falling short.
Let's look at our policy directions. Are we getting things right? Because there are so many people calling for a housing act, which would actually direct us as to where to go. Where do we start from?
Yeah, of course, there has been quite a number of initiatives throughout the years since independence. And you know, when it comes to housing throughout the African continent, we started from this interventionist approach in the 1970s, moved to site and services in the 70s, and then we even came to 1980 where housing finance came in. Then the 1990s came with this issue of enabling environment, and that is where, if you realize, Greener came in as a private sector initiative. Then in 2000, we have this De Soto theory of lab 1, lab 2. But currently, we've done all these things. We're not able to address the housing situation. Now, the framework is talking about inclusive housing, how to use housing to build an inclusive society. But with all the way that the direction that the trend is moving, for instance, now, compound houses, which the vulnerable and the poor used to live in, is now not being built anymore. You see, gradually, compound houses are not being built. So it means that the poor and the poorest are being denied of housing, and government is not taking care of them. So where we are heading towards is actually heading towards a dysfunctional society through housing development, instead of using housing to build an inclusive society.
But what is accounting for this, do we know?
Well, that's why I look at it from the basic need perspective, and I think that if you compare even to some African countries, Ghana being the first country south of the Sahara to gain independence as a leader in Africa has not done enough in terms of housing delivery. Because in the last, since 2000, even Angola attempted to build 1 million houses. Although they couldn't finish, they built about 152. You see, Ethiopia built about 400. Malaysia, just within the last decade, about 78,000 for affordable housing. Look at the statistics in Ghana. I think between the time of this affordable housing till now, which some of them we have completed or we are not completed, maybe around 1,005. So how can you compare 1,500 houses to other countries who are building 400, even on the African continent? You know, so our effort in terms of the delivery from the government perspective, from where I sit, is not enough. And also in terms of the policy, we are not seeing the clear-cut policy targeting the vulnerable, as I'm saying, the 70% of Ghanaians who needs to be addressed, because the 25% are already building for themselves. And as Madam already said over there, the houses these companies are building are for the upper class and the middle class, but not for the 70% that we are talking about.
He makes a very important point there that when we talk about affordability, we are not only targeting public sector workers, where government has always turned its attention to. And Dorothy, I know you always say that affordability is relative. Let's talk about affordable housing and how affordable your products are.
You know, I always say affordability is relative because depending on what you want. If you look at the automobile industry, you go to the markets and there are various types of cars. Why would somebody choose an iX10 and over a Range Rover? And why would somebody choose a Mercedes-Benz over a Toyota? It comes to choice and taste. Now, look at a private developer. Ghana, nobody gives a land bank. When you are a private developer, you source for the land yourself. Now, talk of infrastructure, which is very expensive. It is on your head. So sometimes you have to even pay about 4 times for one land. After going through all this, you do your own infrastructure. How would you build a house and your target market is those down there who are supposed to be catered and supported by the government?
Okay.
You get my point?
Yeah.
So most developers will want to venture into that category, but the cost, the overhead cost is such that you just can't. You just can't do it because we are not supported with any land. We also source for land just like any other person who wants to build. We go through all the challenges that any individual go through. Now, when it comes to the infrastructure, where you need lot of funds, assuming you go and borrow from the open market, who pays the interest for you? So these are some of the things that makes developers unable to actually build for such category of people.
Let me get your point on this one. When we talk about affordability, and you made the point that the reason why your product is one of the best is that you're bringing us the best at an affordable price.
Correct.
How affordable is affordable with regards to your product?
Well, I mean, so far as cement goes, a lot of the question about what it costs is answered by the fact that the basic raw materials for producing cement are imported, right? So right away you have the impact of the foreign exchange coming into play. And I mean, as we see the story of exchange rate going, I mean, on average over the last few years, it averages around 15% per annum. So already there's a lot of pressure on the prices. But what we can do as manufacturers of cement is invest a lot in innovation and best practices from all of our 90 operations to try to be more efficient and continue to provide a quality product of cement, but still at a price that people can pay for. That's what we've been doing for the last 9 months since we've been at play. We have multiple grades of cement as well. What that allows people to do is to come in at a price for, say, a 32.5R, which is the lowest grade of cement, without compromising the quality of the structure, but still be able to put up a house within reasonable cost barriers.
That's very interesting. But Prof, you made that point that we need to bridge that gap, because if you look at 30% of public sector workers who government is always targeting, and 70% of the ordinary Ghanaian who really needs affordable housing, who has which has been left out of the plan from government, then it becomes problematic. And probably that's the reason why the number keeps increasing and we are unable to bridge the gap. But how important or how urgent is this housing deficit, this housing act you're talking about, the one you say will give direction as to where we should go with our housing?
Yeah, I think the issue is that we are looking at Ghana as a country over 60 years of independence, and we have been saddled with housing policies over the years. And I think the argument I was making was that by now we should have moved from that state of housing policy and now we're looking at an act, because we have gotten to the stage where we are even looking at urban regeneration and urban renewal with all these Zongo development projects. This is a time that the issues are becoming complex and you need an act to guide whatever you want to do. And so, for instance, I like the way our gentleman put the issue, and also Madam. I think that when it comes to the middle class and the upper class, they are able to take care of themselves. So the focus should be on the vulnerable in society and what government and stakeholders can do to be able to ensure that we get appropriate housing for them, especially in the light that compound houses, which used to be the place for them, is now even not being built anymore. If you go to Accra, who is going to build a compound house these days? Because the dynamics have changed. You know, so all these people are being pushed into the direction. That is why the slum and things are also increasing. And so the act will be able to give us a firm ground so that National Housing Authority, which has been on the drawing board for several years, for a country which says that the housing crisis, the housing situation is in crisis, by now all these things should be in place, and that is why I'm worried.
She made a very important point, and she enumerated some of the challenges they face, the reason why they cannot provide for those 70, the people who constitute the 70% that we're talking about, those living in the slum areas and all of that, because cost of production is high. All right. What's your assessment of the collaboration between government and the private sector? Because we've heard government say it wishes to collaborate with the private sector to bridge this gap, but over the years we've not really seen much from that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Really, the collaboration is actually the way forward, and that is why when the concept of enabling environment came on, we thought that by now, after almost 20 or 30 years of existence of GRADA, government would have been able to partner them strongly. You know, and for instance, I would give you one typical example in the UK, when they have a situation where they call build now and pay later. You see, this is an initiative between the British government and then property developers, so that in situations where even land is an issue, government can procure land and give to greater members and charge them to come out of affordable housing, for which you can build and pay later with certain incentives, and this is the direction that we want to see more collaboration, because I've seen a lot of initiatives in Ghana in terms of housing, but you don't see the collaboration between Ghana and the property developers in Ghana as to what we can do to channel the energy towards the vulnerable. And so I think that is an area that the collaboration in terms of what they can do on the ground, with government giving them incentives, is what is needed.
Well, I'll have you hold there and come back to the studio. And even before I come back to you, I think we should listen to the Minister for Works and Housing, because he's also been talking about government's plans to deal with the slum areas.
The transformation of approximately 1,039 acres of prime land which Nima and Mamobi occupy will give meaning and beauty to the present vision of inner city and Zongo development. To this end, we are collaborating with the Ministries of Lands and Natural Resources, inner city and Zongo development to make the aforesaid area a world-class residential enclave close to Jubilee House, the seat of government, and I want to stress this for the benefit of those who enjoy propaganda, without dislodging the good people who currently dwell in Nima and Mamobi. We make Nima a world-class residential area. We give the Nima folks a good place to live. We don't ask them to go to any other area. Alongside them will be world-class housing structures for Ghanaians to use. This is another form of redevelopment, and it should cut across the entire nation. Anywhere that we have slums, we should upgrade them. Let me address security services housing.
Atachia is Works and Housing Minister, and of course we've got some solutions here, and that's why everyone must participate in the Habitat Fair, which comes off on September 20. But what special packages, and I'll begin with Dorothy, what special packages do you have for patrons who come to the fair to participate in this fair?
For Elegance Homes, we are offering 10% discounts on price for all properties that prospective buyers will want to buy at the fair. In addition to the 10% discount on price, we are also giving patrons a free remote control gate and a garage, a video doorbell, a fitted kitchen, and many more. So come to the fair and have all your questions answered.
What's your price range if I want to get, maybe you start from 3-bedroom apartments. Yeah. If I want a 3-bedroom apartment, what's the cheapest I can get?
If you want a 3-bedroom house, it's not an apartment, it's a house,
okay, or
a home,
okay,
then I will advise and encourage you to come to the conference center between 20th, 22nd, and 21st and 23rd. And then you will get to know the different types of houses that we have, what goes into it, and then if you want a tailor-made service, we can talk about
Tell me more about, the cheapest I can get. So as I'm coming, I will be prepared to come in.
Aisha, it doesn't take a day to buy a house. Anybody who wants to buy a house doesn't come and then carry money. You come and get to know what you want. You come for viewing, because our house types are different and every house is unique.
But more importantly is, issues that people have raised has been the quality of materials that real estate developers use for their buildings. But let me get your thoughts on what we should expect when we come to Habitat Fair. What special packages you have for the patrons?
Okay, so Aisha, we're a new entrant in Ghana. We're the newest cement factory. So we understand that in order to take away barriers to trial for people, we needed to do something a little over the top. So what we've announced and what we've done at the last 2 installations of the Habitat Fair, so at Wager and a little bit at Achimota, is we've given away coupons to people who have come to our stand to talk to us. These coupons allow everyday Ghanaians to buy cement at an insane price of 30 cedis, right? So for 30 cedis, that means you can, for 3,000 cedis, buy 100 bags of cement, and you can begin work on a foundation for a house that you're putting out. But it's only available at the Habitat Fair if you come over to the stand and talk to us at Super 7.
Okay, so let's address the quality issue, and of course the kind of cement you use, the kind of electricals and all of that you use to put the house together comes to play here. What kind of materials do you use in putting up your buildings?
You know, I always say that quality is key in everything that we do. And for us at Elegant Homes, apart from the estates that we build, we are also into general construction. And so we do lots of construction works. One of our high-end projects is the Lands Commission of Ghana, the one just around Elwak, was constructed by Elegant Homes. Yeah. And so we are careful with our choice of materials. And also, you know, when you talk about quality, then you have to look at pricing. In most cases, most of the people that report, you realize that if you want a house for 20,000 Ghana cedis, you will get. But then, what do you expect in that kind of house? So it goes on like that. But people will not be realistic. They will go and buy something small. Of course, I once had a conversation with somebody who bought from somewhere and was telling me that within the estate, there are no drains, no drainage, nothing. So finding out more, I asked him how much he bought the house for. And I told him that if you buy for this price, where the infrastructural works are expensive. So you want a covered drain, but then you don't want to pay for that. You want a solar street light, you don't want to pay for that. So who put in all this and sell at 20,000 cedis? So these are things we should also look out for. I always say that when you even go to buy wig, the wig we use, there are different types of wigs. If you want the high-end one, you will get. So if you want the other type too, you will get. So it's a matter of choice. Those complaining know where to get the good stuff. Okay. Simple.
Simplicity. Okay, so let's talk about the kind of quality that you provide, especially with when you're putting up a building. I know cement plays a very key role. Absolutely. So what quality are you providing for the market?
Okay, so I mean, as SuperCem being part of the largest, the group of the largest cement manufacturers in the world, we cannot compromise on quality. It's one of our hallmarks. So we invest a lot of time and effort and resources to make sure that every bag of cement, every truck of bulk cement that rolls out of our plant has the seal from the Ghana Standards Authority. So we're certified for our quality of cement, but that's only a minimum standard. We make sure that we go over and above that to make sure that people aren't compromising on the quality of houses they put up. It takes a lot of time and money for people to put up their houses, and we need to guarantee that a house you put up will be able to stand for decades and keep you safe.
Let me bring in Prof into the conversation. And the one most important thing that people talk about is using technology to actually improve our housing sector. What role does technology play in our housing? We know about green technology, and we know about how it improves, for instance, energy and also health. But also there are other technologies that can help improve on our housing whilst also making it affordable. Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much. With the issue of green housing, I think the driving agenda, as you know, is first of all from SDG 11, where we are supposed to use housing to build an inclusive society, and also, as you mentioned, energy efficiency, and then combating climate change. You know, and so the idea is that you should be able to build a house which is environmentally friendly and also which takes care of biodiversity and the others. And that is why if you are looking at affordability, then from our perspective, we need to be moving towards the direction where we can encourage the use of local materials and also wood-based products and recycled materials in that perspective. You know, but if you look at the trend currently, within the middle and the upper class, instead of building energy efficient houses, it looks like we are rather doing the reverse. You know, where yes, that is what is the situation now. Okay. And so with glasses and then air conditioner, which is increasing carbon emission. You see, and so you don't know which direction the policy is driving, and that is why I think that even though the upper and middle class can take care of themselves, there's still the need for a strong policy to guide all this so that it will influence the direction. Because don't forget, the majority of the problems we want to address is with the vulnerable, the 70%, and that is what the government has to devise every means, including using these affordable materials to be able to build. We can use composite technology. Of course, some of the other materials can be used, but yes, to introduce, break and improve earth technology, and that will bring the house price down, and also make sure that the affordable can afford. Madam was trying to shy away from giving you a price, and you know, from the literature, somewhere around 2011, affordable housing for the group you are talking about was estimated around 10,000 to 18,000. You know, so I'm happy that she even said 20,000. We can really build very good, earth building with all the necessary facilities, but then we are targeting the people we want to target, and then leave the people in the upper class to do what they want to do. But we direct them with policy, because if you are going to use air conditioners in your room and it's going to affect climate change, there must be a policy to guide it in terms of whether, because I know, for instance, in the UK, unless I'm mistaken, they used to have what we call extra bedroom tax. If you have extra bedroom that you are taxed for it. You know, there should be something to control the situation so that we use it to benefit the majority of Ghanaians. I think that is the direction that we need to be going.
That's the direction we need to be going. And so we're talking about using technology to improve our housing. What new technologies, Dorothy, are you introducing to better your product?
Well, basically, I will say that in the near future, one may look at using maybe polystyrene, and then also use wood or use bamboo, or containers. You know, we have shipping container buildings. But then, whilst looking at this aspect of changing the way we build or the way we do our things, we also have to look at our cultural acceptance. Okay. Will people accept it? Because I have had instances where you have people that you expect that who even live in some of these wood houses outside the country, and yet they come back home, and then when you take them out for viewing, they hit your wall and say, cement wom yabefi. Okay. So culturally, we also need to reorient our mind that if in future we try to use some of these local materials to build, then it wouldn't be hanging on the neck of any developer that you are using inferior materials, because if it is not a policy direction, and then developer A is using these materials and developer B is still in the traditional method, then your people own competitors will even use it against you. They will tell them that if you go to developer A, you try and hit the partitioning, listen to the voice, then you will know that the material used is inferior. So all this, I agree with Prof. Policy direction is key, but we will eventually get there. But for now,
we should stay with where we are. Kobe, what new technologies are you introducing to better your product?
Okay, so for us, I mean, the production and delivery of cement is mainly a logistics exercise, right? So what we do is we try to find efficiencies, ways to do things faster, quicker for the customers. One of the things that we've introduced, which is first in Ghana, is by introducing a robotic loading system to complement the human effort. So because of that, we're able to load trucks of cement that leave our plant in something like 15 minutes, right? Okay. And that's something that's unheard of, because normally a lot of loading over here happens by hand and can take an hour. That's a lot of time spent and efforts. But by combining these resources, it's one of the ways that we're able to push down the price of cement so we can continue to deliver value to our end users at the end of the day.
You do other things apart from cement?
No, we are grinding. We're a cement grinding plant. This is what we do.
That's what you do. Well, interesting there. So if you're thinking of owning a house, you know where to go. From the 20th of September at the Accra International Conference Center, the Habitat Fair is kick-starting, and you have people like companies like Elegant Homes, you have Super Cement, and all other companies that will help you improve on your building and also get affordable housing. So you don't want to miss it. When we come back from the break, I'll be finding out those of you who do not have cash in hand to go and purchase a house, whether there are plans or there's a payment plan from these companies for you. And I'll also be finding out from Prof what the way forward is in dealing with our housing deficit. Please stay with us. We're still live on PM Express. We're talking about affordable housing, and we're talking about bridging the gap of the housing sector, the deficit, which now stands over 1.7 million. And we're talking about how to deal with this gap. And before I went on that break, I was talking about what to expect when we come there, and also for the people who don't have bulk money to come and purchase a house, what kind of payment plan do you have for such people?
Okay, for such people, we have mortgage, where you can access mortgage if you qualify. Currently, mortgage requires that you do between 20 to 30% of the purchase price, and then they will come in to finance the remaining 70 or 80% for you, and then spread between 10 to 15 years, depending on your age and your income. Then we have what we call the personal self-financing, which we allow clients to pay like 50%, and then we can spread the remaining between 12 to 18 months for you, or maximum 2 years. But those are applicable to houses yet to be started. And then we have what we call the alternative payment plan. That is, if all this I have enumerated above doesn't fit, you can come, talk to us, and then we can meet you at a point.
How long can you spread the cost?
The self-financing we can do up to maximum of 2 years. Anything beyond that, we advise to go in for mortgage.
Mortgage.
Because that will give you a longer period, sometimes 10 years, 8 years, which we think will be better for you.
It's quite unfortunate that it's raining, so I may take a risk of buying cement, putting it down. I may lose it. Otherwise, from 34 cities to 30 cities for this period, I think it's quite amazing. But do you also have such plans for people who need like 50, 100 bags of cement and they don't have the money at hand?
Unfortunately, I mean, the cement business is like, it's overwhelmingly a cash business. It's a cash.
Pay as you go.
So, I mean, understanding that is one of the considerations that went into us being extremely aggressive for this promotional period at the Habitat Fair. We knew we couldn't do payment plans and those sorts of exciting things, so we went with an aggressive rate that could cater to people. Okay,
so 30 cities. You just have to bring your money and get it. If you don't, cash and Prof, so we've been able to establish the fact that we need a policy direction, and then after that, we need to bring in the 70% of people that we've left behind in looking for affordable housing. Where do we begin from? How do we get away from here?
Thank you very much. And let me start from where Madam said we are getting there. And I think my philosophy and what I've learned over the years is that it's either you are a leader or you are a follower. You know, and I think Ghana, from where we started from, by now should be a leader on the continent when it comes to some of these things, you know, including housing. But back to your question, you see, in Ghana, we are dealing with two modes of housing delivery. The self-built housing, which individuals buy their land, take their time to build, mainly by the upper class. And then we have the mass house building. The issue is that the self-built approach that we are relying on and we are proud on will never solve the housing problem for us. Looking at the deficit, if you want to address the housing problem, then you have to go mass housing. And going mass housing means that We have Greda as an established and other property developers as established property developers in the country who have some track record in building for the upper class. The government, if government cannot go into direct provision of housing, these are the people they have to collaborate strongly with to make sure that they bring in strategies with incentives to be able to help us to address the housing situation in terms of delivering mass housing and leave this self-built housing, which leads to locked out capital for several years before you even.
Are you satisfied with the collaboration so far?
No, I don't. From where I sit, I don't think I've seen any concrete in terms of pragmatic effort that Ghana government and Greda has been able to come together to come up with a housing initiative which has become successful and also affordable. But other countries are doing it, and I think Ghana should be able to do it. And then just ending, I think the issue of the land is, I think Madam mentioned it, is critical. We all know it. You know, as we know, the land will go to the highest bidder, you see. And so with all this, it means that, and of course, the land is not in the hands of government, but there should be a way that government can deal with the chiefs to make sure that it has some control over the land, for which it can then partner Greda and be able to give some out to them, like the British are doing with this build now and pay later. So the land is given out to you. If you are able to build an affordable housing, then they go into an arrangement with you with certain incentives. And also, lastly, I would say that with the National Housing Policy 2015, which contains some of the things that maybe implementation is the problem, perhaps you should also be looking at giving or empowering local governments to also start going into housing, so that it takes some of the burden from the central government, to take us forward, and so that we can look at the housing situation in an inclusive manner.
I'm very grateful for your time, Professor Haji. Professor Divine Haji is head of Center for Settlement Studies at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I'm extremely grateful for your time this evening. And as we prepare to start our Habitat Fair, what should patrons expect from you?
I would say that patrons should expect nothing but the best. Visit our stand, look at what we have, follow up with site viewing, and make an informed choice. A journey of 1,000 miles, begin with one step a day. Make that bold step with Elegant Homes, and you'll be glad you did.
Kobe?
For us, as I keep saying, it's a coming out party for us at SuperSem. So we're looking forward to meeting, the everyday Ghanaians, the man on the street who's looking to put up his first house. Just come over and say hi. We just want to introduce ourselves to the Ghanaian market as the first step to building a long, prosperous relationship between us and the market here in Ghana.
So you heard it for yourself, and I want to thank you so much for coming. Kobe Adams is Commercial Director for SuperSem Cement, and Dorothy Kwashi is Executive Director of Elegant Homes. Thanks so much for passing by, and you at home, thanks so much for watching. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of our programs.